Welcome to Formula 1+1, where we break down the fastest sport on the planet into bite-sized episodes. Whether you're a seasoned fan, fueled by passion, or you've never watched a race in your life and just want to know what all the fuss is about, we welcome you. Get comfortable in your race seat because it's lights out and away we go. Hey, thanks for tuning in to my second episode. F1 is bringing us a record-breaking 24 races this season, and I'll be reviewing the calendar with a few fun facts about some of the locations that we'll see this year. They planned for this many races last season, but 2 races got cancelled, which meant only 22 actually took place. 24 weekends for us to look forward to this year. For some perspective, in its first season, Formula 1 visited 7 countries for 7 races in 1950. As the popularity of racing steadily increased, so did the number of races in a year. Now, obviously, the logistics of moving an event like this around the world has gotten exponentially easier since then, but that doesn't come without a cost. Formula 1 has been under fire for its massive carbon footprint, so they answered with their net zero 2030 commitment. I'll get into this more in a future episode, but in short, one of the things they've been looking at is regionalizing the calendar more to cut down on the freight back and forth between continents. We haven't seen major changes with this yet, as they are tied to specific dates or times of the year with some of the race locales, but when it does happen, I think it'll be amazing for all of the teams in that it will alleviate some of the issues that arise from transportation, like travel time and jet lag, and for teams with lower budgets, freight costs between races. Last year, the Haas team actually cut their pit wall in half from 6 seats down to 3 in an attempt to save wherever they can. So let's dive into this year's calendar, shall we? Testing for this season started on February 21st and we race until December 8th. We started the year off just this past weekend in Bahrain, which marked the 4th season opener at this track, and this upcoming weekend we hop next door for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Saudi starts a bi-weekly race schedule until mid-May. After the first weekend off, racing resumes in Daniel Ricciardo and Oscar Piastri's home country of Australia, followed by a quick jaunt over to Asia, first in Japan for Yuki Tsunoda's home race. This race was held in September last season, but it has switched months with the Azerbaijan race. I believe the reasoning has to do with the weather in Japan in September. A couple years ago, this race was held in October and ended up being stopped during the second lap due to torrential downpour. By the time it was safe enough to race, they only ended up getting 28 laps in before they hit the 3-hour time limit on a race. I use the term safe loosely as the track was obviously still soaking wet. There were safety concerns and a bunch of incidents, so it made sense to move it. Next is the return of the Chinese Grand Prix, which has been cancelled for 4 consecutive seasons due to COVID. This marks Zhou Guanyu's first time racing in his home country, and even more awesome is that it's in his home city of Shanghai. 2020 should have been the debut of the Vietnamese Grand Prix, but like many of the other races, it was cancelled due to COVID. It was slated for 2021, but was later cancelled again after one of the people heavily involved in organizing the race was arrested on corruption charges. Next, we cross the ocean to home soil for the Haas team in the US. Miami's fan favorite is Floridian Logan Sargent. In mid-May, we cross over the ocean to kick off the European races, with back-to-back weekends in Italy, then Monaco. Due to flooding, Imola was the other race that was cancelled last year, so it'll be nice to be back there. And well, Monaco is Monaco, home to driver Charles Leclerc, and by far my favorite street circuit for more than that reason alone. Then we take a weekend off as we head back to North America to race in Montreal, the home race for Canadian driver Lance Stroll. Then another weekend off before starting the main European leg of the season with a triple header. First stop, Spain, Fernando Alonso and Carlos Sainz's home race, followed by Red Bull's home race in Austria. Next, it's the British Grand Prix in the home country of many drivers and teams, Lando Norris, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, as well as Williams, McLaren, and Aston Martin. Silverstone is dear to all of the drivers and teams, though, as it is where the very first Grand Prix was held in F1's very first season. Then another weekend off, followed by the Hungarian Grand Prix, and we round off July with the Belgian Grand Prix before the drivers head to their summer break. This is a mandatory break, including factory shutdowns, which means halting development, production, simulations, etc. This includes any third-party suppliers as well. There are some exceptions, but again, I'll save that for another episode. With the race season being longer than ever, this break is imposed to ensure that all employees are granted personal time off and that they actually take it. The teams can choose when during that month-long break that they want to shut down, but they must be off for 14 consecutive days. Most teams typically take the first week to do post-race wrap-up from the race before, then take weeks 2 and 3 off, then head back in the final week to turn everything back on to gear up for the restart of the season, which like last year will be in the Netherlands. There's no doubt that it'll be utter insanity there, as it is the home race for the reigning world champion Max Verstappen. This is followed by another race that is known for its amazing fans in Monza. This is the second Italian race, but it is touted as Ferrari's home race. Ferrari has a lot of history with this track, so while Imola is actually closer to Ferrari's home base in Maranello, Monza is still considered Ferrari's home race. You can find Ferraris Tifosi at every race around the world, but the fans at this race are arguably the most passionate for any team at any Grand Prix. This is also Visa Cash App RB's home race, but it's not nearly at the same level. A couple weeks after Italy is the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, after which we head back to Asia for the last race in Singapore before the month-long fall break. This is the first year that Formula One will see a formal break in the fall. I couldn't find anything in the FIA regulations that indicate another mandatory shutdown, so I suspect that this break has more to do with the scheduling of the last set of races. After the fall break, we're back to this side of the globe for 4 races, starting with the US Grand Prix in Texas before heading south for Sergio Perez's home race, the Mexican Grand Prix. Then we continue south for the Brazilian Grand Prix, where there's a massive F1 following. You'd think this was another home race for Hamilton with the number of fans he has there. A couple years ago, in the week leading up to the race, they even made him an honorary citizen. After a 3-week break, we go into a triple header finale. First, back up to the US for the 3rd time to race in Las Vegas. The US is the only country on the calendar to host 3 races. Netflix's series Drive to Survive has helped F1's popularity in North America increase exponentially. This next part of the schedule is crazy to me. The following weekend is all the way in Qatar. They did this last year too, went from the US straight to the Middle East the very next weekend. I can't imagine coming from Vegas of all places and having to get over your jet lag quickly enough to perform at that level. Add on top of that, the Qatar Grand Prix is the final sprint race of the year, so they're racing even earlier. I digress. The Qatar race has been moved from October to December this year after the disaster of a race last year due to the heat and humidity. Hopefully the later date will prove to have less dangerous conditions for the drivers, especially considering how much risk they already take when the conditions are favorable. Anyways, once Qatar concludes, it's off to the season finale in Abu Dhabi. The Yas Marina circuit has hosted the final race since 2014, so it's become synonymous with the season coming to a close before we head into the winter break. This quote-unquote break is longer than the summer break, but the actual shutdown imposed by the FIA only runs from December 24th until January 1st. This gives teams time in the off-season to spend the holidays with family in between the intense work required to conduct the necessary research and production for next season's car. So that's the 2024 race calendar. It's a long season, but there are a lot of breaks. For us fans anyways. The teams, they tend to work throughout the year with the exception of the shutdowns and the odd couple days off here and there. Some drivers have been pretty vocal about how rigorous the calendar has become, while others revel in the extra events. But if this past off-season is any indication of what's in store for future downtime this season, we as fans will not be bored. There's no shortage of drama and action, that's for sure. Thanks for hanging out with me today. If you learned something, shoot me a message on Threads or Instagram, as I'd love to know what that tidbit was. And if you didn't learn anything, shoot me a message anyways and teach me something. I'm always up for learning more about my favorite sport. Join us on Sunday when we'll be discussing the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Stay fast, my friends. And as the checkered flag waves for this episode, we thank you for tuning in. Whether you're listening from the grandstands or your living room couch, we appreciate you spending your valuable time with us. Tune in next time for more fun. Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss out. Catch you at the next pit stop.